cases, the UFO, the phenomenon that is, approaches the airplane. This is what a 25-year senior NASA scientist claims. This is by Stephen McCambly Collective Spark. The UFO phenomenon, or as we call it now, the unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, as the U.S. Navy, the Department of Defense says, and we know that it's going to be disclosing details of certain sightings as of June 1st. So this UFO UAP phenomenon is exploding within the mainstream. The topic is far from taboo and is receiving legitimate coverage via mainstream media news now. And as a result, millions of people who watch these networks are becoming aware of the fact that there are objects that have been seen by many trained observers while simultaneously tracking on both ground and air radar. There are many such incidents that have been declassified where these objects are performing maneuvers no known aircraft can perform with the technology that we have today, and in many cases seem to defy our understanding of aerodynamics and physics. Kindly support my Patreon account since YouTube has again demonetized my YouTube channel. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. This massive onslaught of legitimacy that's being brought to the attention of the world via mainstream media does have many people in the UFO field a tad bit suspicious. No doubt about it, the efforts by many high-ranking people who are appearing on these networks and doing a great job bringing credibility to the subject is a wonderful thing to see. But an important question to ask is, why, after such a long period where the subject was completely ridiculed and labeled a conspiracy theory by mainstream networks, is the subject all of a sudden being taken seriously by them? Now, intelligence agencies are required to release what they know about the phenomenon in a couple of months. June 1st is the date. But as Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, recently stated, classified information is going to remain classified. In other words, as I've written about before, we're likely not going to get any significant information that is not already known. Furthermore, there's a lot of speculation going on regarding the origins of these objects and the importance of finding out where they are coming from. Now, we had a senator a couple of days ago saying that the UFO phenomenon is real and he's very worried about it because of national security reasons. They still don't know what it is and who's behind this, because we don't have the technology to have such craft. And they're also over the military installations and bases in the United States. That's not only the United States that have been sighted, but all over the world. Now, going back to this, in the mainstream, it's still being presented as a mystery, but based on research, many were aware of the evidence that UFOs were and are real decades ago, when it was not even considered a possibility. Many are also quite convinced that the phenomenon, or at least part of the phenomenon, is indeed extraterrestrial. There is ample evidence which suggests this. And in his last interview before his death, conducted by director James Fox, Colonel Robert Friend, who from 1958 to 1962 was director of the U.S. government investigation into the phenomenon at that time, Project Blue Book, suggests the U.S. Air Force knew what these objects were, which is why they shut down the program, hinting at the idea that they knew they were extraterrestrial. There are countless credible sources who have been emphasizing this for decades, and again, there's also evidence available suggesting that this is the case. Now, former CIA Director John Brennan, from 2013 to 17, was asked about UFO phenomenon, and he stated the following: I think some of the phenomena we may be seeing continues to be unexplained and might in fact be some type of phenomenon that is the result of something that we don't yet understand, and that could involve some type of activity that some might say constitutes a different form of life. There are also countless amounts of stories from indigenous lore and mythology as well, ancient texts, witness testimony, and other people in the know that hint to this idea. Perhaps some of these objects are ours as well, perhaps reverse engineering from crashed craft. Now, what will we get from the mainstream? Will they be using the phenomenon to debunk the idea that these objects are extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional? Will there be a threat narrative attached to the phenomenon, despite the fact that there is no good reason to characterize the behavior of these objects as a threat? Who knows? We will have to wait and see. Now, we have to stop reacting to intrusions by UFOs as a threat. There is more. This should not be looked at specifically as a threat with the phenomenon that we observe. If they wanted to blow us up, blow up those F-18s, they would be able to do it. Obviously, that's not what it's all about. And this idea of just labeling it all as a threat because it's unknown, that's the wrong idea. Now, the quote above comes from renowned UFO researcher, scientist, mathematician, and astrophysicist Dr. Jacques Vallée, who recently made an appearance on the Joe Rogan show to discuss UFO phenomenon. The F-18s he's referring to come from the encounter released by the Pentagon a few years ago that show the Navy pilots attempting to intercept the Tic Tac UFO. That's the Nimitz encounter off the West Coast in 2004. But then in 2015, we had another UFO encounter on the East Coast. Now, in the interview, the video shows Dr. Richard Haynes talking about the phenomenon with a specific focus on pilot sightings, for which there have been more than 3,000 recorded. It's a great interview to learn about the phenomenon types of behavior that these objects are constantly seen displaying. Again, a common theme in these is the objects performing mind-altering maneuvers, traveling at unobtainable speeds and more, even disappearing and appearing, basically interdimensional. This reminds us of the Emerald Tablets and what thought the Atlantean was describing as the technology that the Atlanteans had at that time. Now, another one is the fact that many times these objects approach the aircraft like military jets, for example. Critical electronic capability, like the ability to fire missiles, for example, is disabled. Now, he also mentions that in 50% of the cases he's come across, the objects appear to come within the vicinity of our aircraft, performing fascinating maneuvers and demonstrations, what appears to be curiosity. He mentions that the phenomenon seems to perform evasive maneuvers to avoid our aircraft so as to not create any sort of potential for collision. And he says, when I saw this part of the interview, it reminded me of the following quote from General Nathan Twining in 1947. The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. The reported operating characteristics such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, particularly in roll, and the actions which must be considered evasive when sighting or contacted by friendly aircraft and radar, lend belief to the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. Richard is now the chief scientist at NARCAP, an organization that has investigated, documented, and analyzed aviation safety-related observations and incidents that have involved UFOs since 1999. And below is a picture of the UFO taken by Royal Air Canadian Air Force pilot R.J. Childerhose, August 27, 1956, from an altitude of 36,000 feet. The object was higher than 4 kilometers and was observed for more than 45 seconds. So the takeaway, it's important to recognize that in this day and age, we have to be wary of any government sudden release of UFO truth, quote unquote. We know that governments have been misleading the public for over 100 years about this, the reality of UFO phenomenon, and whatever they have actually discovered is highly unlikely to make its way to the public domain. Some suggest we may get a sanitized fraction of it. This is partly why so many citizens around the world have lost their trust in transparency and mainstream media honesty. Now, today, national security, quote unquote, seems to be the term used to justify the classification of a wealth of information. And at least from some people's perspective, it's not always done to protect the public and in the best interests of citizens, but rather to protect certain political and corporate interests and agendas. We've come to the point where individuals who expose crimes or unethical actions taken by governments and multinational corporations are somehow silenced. This does not what does this say about humanity at this point? So UFO, for example, UFO technology could revolutionize the way we generate energy. Would it be used to provide free energy to all, or would it be used for profit control, perhaps build weaponry? This puts forth the question, does humanity need a shift in consciousness in the way we perceive ourselves, our world, and what we really want to be doing to our planet? Does the current human experience resonate with us deep down? Or are we living in our whatever story has simply been handed to us? Now, this was from Collective Evolution here, published under Creative Commons on Collective Spark. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support.